Woman don't suffer, lower everybody. Suffer, suffer for enjoy forever. Money no like woman, woman no like woman. She no be like water.
Alright, a beautiful morning to you. Welcome to Grace 95.5 FM. How you doing? I trust you're having a wonderful time with us today on this Saturday broadcast. And of course, it's time for the program The Amazon. The Amazon is a gender-based program that comes your way every Saturday at 10 a.m. here on Grace 95.5 FM. And of course, today, debuting on Confluence TV, we'll say good morning to our viewers out there as well. So you're welcome once again. We know that for the past few months, we have been on a very special media campaign on gender-based violence. And this media campaign is proudly brought to you by Cha Vivi Women and Girl Child Development Foundation. They have been doing an amazingly impressive work so far in the sensitization and awareness on issues concerning the women. And we've been receiving so much positive feedback, commending their good work, and of course we'll continue to commend them on the wonderful work they are doing. And not forgetting, yes, we are talking about gender-based violence. We've been bringing you some very not easily identifiable relationships between gender-based violence and some other issues, and today is no exception. You might be wondering what we're bringing your way today. Today we are looking at a topic that we call natural disaster and its contribution to gender-based violence. Someone out there is befuddled. What is going on? Don't worry, I'm still in the same boat, but with time we'll get to understand what we are saying. Natural disaster and its contribution to gender-based violence. I'll be your anchor person for this program. Victory May is my name, and of course we have in the studio, as always, the CEO, Cha Vivi Women and Girl Child Development Foundation, in the person of Halima Oiza Sadiq. She is right here in the studio, and she's going to say a quick good morning to our listeners out there. Good morning to you, Halima.
Good morning, and good morning to everyone out there.
All right, so we're going to just hit the ground running so we can have so much time for you as well listening to be part of the conversation. So I am going to come to the director here, who is well vested in the subject matter. You're going to tell us, sir, what is natural disaster? And as you're saying that, could you also bring it to Kogi State context? You know, what are the common natural disasters we have in Kogi State?
Natural disaster is we can describe it as a sudden accident that has to do with a great loss of life, properties, means of livelihood, and the host of other things.
Okay.
And we have cases like thunderbolt, earthquake. We have issues like flood, which is peculiar to Kogi State. Every Tom, Dick, Harry knows that in Kogi State or Nigeria at large. We have thunderbolt, we have hurricane. We thank God they are not happening here, but of course they are natural disasters. They are not caused by a human being. Some people call them act of God. They naturally happen, and they have a lot of catastrophic consequences and destruction.
Okay, so
and in Kogi State here, I think flood is the commonest or the most prominent disaster we know. Of course, nobody's responsible, except that we have other contributory factors. But you will recall that the volume of water that brings about flooding in states like Gombe, Bayelsa, rivers, deltas, even Kogi here, is as a result of maybe climate change and a lot of water or rainwater. And certain dams like Lado dams, when they get filled up in Cameroon and they are released, of course there's a lot of water, a lot of volume of water that the river, either Niger and Benue, cannot hold, and they spread and covers a lot of settlement at the coastal communities along those states.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come to Mrs. Oguche here. First of all, before we delve you into the question, we just mentioned hyperdeck. We want to understand what hyperdeck. For those who don't know, what is hyperdeck? Just the full and just a bit about it, so we know what it is.
Hyperdeck is hydroelectric power producing areas development commission.
That's a lot. Can you repeat,
Yes.
please?
Hydroelectric power producing areas development commission.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. So now we have an idea. We just said hyperdeck. To the layman, we'll be like, what is hyperdeck? So now we know. Thank you so much. Okay, so now looking at natural disaster, what natural disasters could we associate with the mandate of your firm here? That's hyperdeck.
Hyperdeck, Hydroelectric Power Development Commission, was established to address ecological challenges as a result of dam operations.
Okay.
So we have flood, erosions, all as a result of dams operations.
Okay.
So when we talk of disaster, we talk of flood, we talk of erosion, as well as hyperdeck is concerned. And the issue of saying natural disaster, I think, is as a result of dam operations.
If you say dam operations, what do you mean?
That is as a result of the dams operation we have, like where we have all these rivers like Niger, Kebbi, all those ones, there are dams.
Okay.
And these dams, that is where we get this our electricity. That is why you have hydroelectric power.
Okay.
That is where we get this our electricity from. And as a result of these dam operations, a lot of havoc are being caused.
Okay.
The negative effect, that is when you have the flood, you have the erosions and all these things, they come as a result of the dam operations.
Okay. So I'm going to come to Halima here. This is where the chunk of the ball comes to you here, because you have to give us the correlation. Natural disaster, gender-based violence. How can natural disaster, how does it contribute to GBV, the challenges of GBV, especially by women and girls? Can you throw more light, please?
In this context, we'll be looking at flood, because that's what is peculiar to our state, Kogi State, and you know, its contribution or how it relates to gender-based violence. Now, like our guest from the Ministry of Environment has rightly defined what natural disaster is all about. When there's natural disaster, in this case flood, you agree with me that there's infrastructure damage, there's a breakout of disease, there's malnutrition, there's loss of lives, okay, there's loss of lives, there's loss of properties. So a lot of havoc is being wreaked when there's natural disaster like flood, which is peculiar to Kogi. And we all know what happened during the 2012 flood, okay. It was one of, before this one that happened in 2023, it was one of the worst flood ever, and Kogi happens to even be the state that received the heat of it because of the location of the state. We are located at the country, the confluence of the country, River Niger and River Benue. So the impact is usually on the high side when it comes to flood in the country and in Kogi State. And when this thing happens, people who live at the river airway or the river ways are usually impacted or affected by this flood, and they have to be displaced. Okay, they are displaced. Now you see people have lost their sources of livelihood, people have lost their shelter, people even lost life, they even lost loved one in the course of it. And government, you know, of course, supports with the building of IDP camps where they are relocated to. When they do all of these things, there are things, there are havoc, there are, you know, violence that are being perpetrated beneath or behind the curtain that people don't get to know about. So let's take it from here. When we talk about flood and as a natural disaster and GBV, these are the prevalent kind of gender-based violence. The sexual gender-based violence like rape, molestation, coercion, domestic violence, that is the intimate partners and violence. Let's take it from the first one, domestic violence or intimate partners and violence. When there's natural disaster like flood and the household head get to lose his sources of livelihood. Remember, most of these people are into agriculture, they are into farming, into fishing, and when they lose this, they become jobless. And when a man cannot afford for his household, it triggers anger in him. You know, it triggers his ego. So any little thing can, you know, trigger violence in the home. When the woman needs money and the man sees that he's incapacitated, he cannot provide for the household, what it gets into violence. It can result into fighting and, you know, domestic violence. That's how it affects it. Secondly, what happens in the camp? When you go to the IDP camp, for us that are humanitarian workers, we know what happens there, where some of these people are being raped, especially the women and the girl child. They are being raped. And for those vulnerable young girls, women who cannot afford for themselves, they go for sex for food. You see, people want to give them food, but with a condition that they must have sex with them. What led to that? It's a natural disaster. It's a flood leading to their displacement, you know, taking off their sources of livelihood that has gotten them to that vulnerable end that they have to give sex for food. Okay, let's even look at what happened last year during the 2022 flood, where, you know, the government agencies, other NGOs, they go there to supply them with relief materials. They go there, give them carton of Indomie. You know what they do? They don't eat it. They take this carton of Indomie to the market. They go to the market to sell the Indomie to get the money. Because at that point, what is basic for them, what is important for them is that cash. Yes, we know that there's an aspect of, okay, them needing food. But at that point, there are some basic things that only money can procure that for them. So that's what happened. We have sex for food, we have domestic violence, we have coercion, where, you know, behind the curtain at night time, the young ones are being coerced to, you know, have sex, you know, with the men or with the guys. These are things. Then their lives are also at risk. There's an issue of you know, theft because of the insecurity or the safety of the IDP camp, which is not favorable or conducive most time. So these are the things. So every year or every time we have this flood, these are the things that happen. And research has it that, you know, worldwide there are 4 billion people that have suffered. 4 billion people that have suffered from this natural disaster like flood, like drought, you know, and storm, and 300,000 persons have lost their life in the course of this. Now, how about we're not even talking about infrastructure damage like dam, bridges, houses, roads, houses, schools, hospitals, you know, destroying soil, causing damage to the ecosystem. These are another part of it that natural disaster can cause, and even flood for this context. If we leave that and we're talking about the aspect of gender-based violence, and we're looking at a world where we have gender equality, a world where we protect the peace, the security, and the well-being of the people, especially the vulnerable ones like the women and the girl child. For us to achieve this, the issue of natural disaster, and in this case flood, must be tackled, must be taken seriously. Okay, must be taken seriously. So if we want to end GBV, we can't do away with natural disaster. We can't play down on flood in Kogi State, which happens to be a flood-prone state or area. We can't play down on natural disaster, and that's why this topic is very germane at this very time. Because we're already in the season. From June upward, you know, there's excess of rain, and when there's excess of rain, like Ministry of Environment has rightly defined it for us, it leads to flood. So we need to prepare. Okay, and most times we are reactive in responding to flood, but flood is no longer a new thing to the country or to Kogi State. So it shouldn't be something that should appear like, oh, we didn't know that it was coming. We knew. Okay, we are aware that there's flood. 2012 has, since 2000 to 2000 and to 2019 we've experienced flood. Then 2012 we have experienced flood. I think 2015 or so. Then 2019. Thank you. 2019. Then 2022. So we shouldn't. It shouldn't be a new thing. By now we should have built resilience on how to prepare for flood, the flood itself, and the post-flooding activity. These are things that should, you know, be at the beck and call of all duty bearers or stakeholders when we talk about natural disaster like flood, and to also be able to mitigate its contribution to gender-based violence.
You will discover that, you see, when it occurs, some women and the guy child, in attempt to escape, some of them just, because they have lost their buildings, they have lost their means of livelihood, and they are just going to possibly unknown destination. And some men, you know, thugs out, take advantage of them and abuse them like that. And like she said, you don't get it heralded anywhere. Equally, some insincere and disgruntled individual will just offer accommodation. Oh, this has happened to you, madam. This has happened to you, please come over. And they will see it as a heaven, and they will get to such accommodation, and they are abused and so many other things. Unlike men who, if they are affected, of course, they navigate their way, they can defend themselves, they can resist. And some people even take advantage of taking them from the immediate environment to some other places and say, oh, look, I'm going to settle you, and the rest of them, you know, sweet, sugar-coated tongues. And at the end of the day, the story is abuse, harassment, and violence against these victims.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm happy that you made that addendum to what she said, because it shows that you are aware that there is this problem. Okay, good. Now, the problem is established, and like she said, trying to be proactive for the we hope it doesn't happen, but you know, we've already started having campaigns of flooding. Now, as from the Ministry of Environment that you are, how this natural disaster, I know you have response teams for natural disaster in place, but are they even tailored in a way that they can ensure the safety of women and girl children, I mean, when it comes to you know, placing them in camps and all that? What is the provision put in place for protecting them?
Yes, I think in the past the government has done their best at securing schools and other camps to accommodate these people. I can recall several times we have profiled thousands of people, and there was a time the state government built where we call Wada Flood Estate. Okay. Then there was another building that the federal government, of course, built. It's like a dormitory or hostel, if you call it like that. And on yearly basis, when it happens, schools are opened and victims of flood are accommodated there. And I think in recent time, to be factual, the state government has actually appointed a special advisor to His Excellency on humanitarian affairs, and I'm one of the key players of that. Okay. And I think the woman who is the special advisor, Ajia Usman Musa, is going far and wide to make sure that international NGO that matters are actually brought on board to do the best they can do. And particularly 2023 anticipated flood. The IOM, let me be specific, have been here, and they have gotten about 4 places where either temporary or permanent structures will be erected for those who might likely be affected, and that is fantastic. In fact, I'm saying this as an individual. I'm not a politician, and I don't think I can be one. But honestly, these are things that are going on, and you will applaud it.
Okay, thank you. Even though you have said that it is fantastic, we'll take your word for it for now.
Yes.
But we will still do our own investigations to ensure that.
In fact, we'll be holding a meeting by Tuesday and Wednesday to ensure the strategy we're planning, even though any cases has not been reported. So you will know we're actually ready for the game.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that and for what your ministry is doing for the anticipated flooding here in Kogi State. Okay, if you're just tuning in, welcome. This is Grace 95.5 FM, and of course, we are on the media campaign on gender-based violence, brought to you by Chacha Vivi Women and Girl Child Development Foundation. And today we're looking at natural disaster and how it contributes to gender-based violence. We have, of course, in the studio our guests from Hyperdeck and from Ministry of Environment who are helping us understand the relationship between gender-based violence and natural disaster. So I'm going to come to you now, Mrs. Joanne. Let's look at your organization again. And what are they doing? Or what have they done? What are they doing? And what are they planning to do, in terms of its mandates in this state, in Kogi State in particular, since its inception?
Thank you so much. The mandate of a Hyperdeck is to cushion the ecological, socio-economic, and psychological effect of a dams operation.
Okay.
And in Kogi State, Hyperdeck has done a lot to the affected communities. The first was a provision of boreholes, and even presently is still on to most of the affected communities. There's also solar lights also distributed to the affected communities. There's what we call security support, where motorcycles, over 300 motorcycles were distributed to the affected communities. This to aid them in chasing out criminals from the communities. There's what we call a school support program, where indigent students in the tertiary institution were given scholarship, and also 2022 and 2021-2022, Hyperdeck paid over 1,200 student NECO who are to write NECO. They sponsored it. And we also have what we call YTP, Youth Transformation Program. Hyperdeck believes that if the youth are being transformed, the state is transformed and the nation too is transformed. So they brought in, they paid, took care of 648 youth in training them in the skills of their choice. There are so many skills. So they were training them, also paying the trainers too. And we also have a primary school project where in each local government, that is the affected local government, we have a primary school built a block of 3 classrooms with a VIP 6 toilets. And also the primary school are being furnished with the chairs, locker and chairs, and even books, school bags, and the rest for each of the local government area. We also have fertilizers that the Hyperdeck brought as a subsidized rate for the peasant farmers, because we believe that in the course of flooding, a lot of their farms, a lot got bad. So in order to help them, they brought fertilizers to the peasant farmers to encourage them. And also, presently there is erosion control project going on in Kotokarfi, where presently the Hyperdeck has spent over 250 million naira in controlling the erosion within the Kotokarfi town. And also, even during the floods, there were relief materials brought by Hyperdeck to cushion the effects. We have beddings, food items, and so many others. And even of recent, during this changing of currency, that there was no money in circulation, Hyperdeck brought foodstuff, a lot of things to government house in order to help cushion the effect of the hardship on the people. So there are so many that Hyperdeck has prepared, doing, and more that are yet to come for the affected communities in Kogi State.
Okay. Thank you. We must applaud you then
Thank
for
you.
the good work you're doing. And I hope we want to implore you not to rest on your oars. You keep doing more.
We'll do more.
And and I'm coming to you now. What are your recommendations now to the government and to other agencies especially concerning safety of women and girls?
Yes, I want to say a big thank you to Mr. Friday Ogeti for that robust contribution. And just to build upon what he has already said, I want to say that contingency planning is very key. It's a management tool used to analyze the impact of potential crisis so that adequate and appropriate arrangements are made in advance to respond in a timely, effective, and appropriate way to the needs of the affected populations. So the government and other agencies, thank God Hyperdeck is here, thank God for the Ministry of Environment is here, the government is here, and this is a very key and vital thing that should be taken into consideration. Contingency planning, like Mr. Friday has rightly said, flooding is no longer an emergency. Mr. Friday has rightly said, flooding is no longer an emergency because it has happened over and over again. So by now, we should know appropriate measure to apply to it. And secondly, in the aspect of construction of dams, bridges, and the government should consider an infrastructure that is resilient to disaster like flooding when constructing dams, bridges, and even the IDP camps too. They should look into the construction measure. Disaster resilience and construction of IDP camp is very key. And also in constructing these ID camps, women and children should be taken into consideration such that their safety first in construction, and also the aspect of because I remember the last flood when we visited some of those IDP camps, the women had challenge of visiting the restroom. There are no restrooms for them, and it can be easy for the men to just find their way around the bush and ease themselves, but for the women and the girl child is very difficult. So when constructing IDP camps, these are things that should be taken into consideration. And also lightning, he talked about lightning IDP camps. We need to flood our camps with light, such that in the night time, their safety is taken into consideration. They are aside, giving them relief support. How about their security is very key. So these are contingency planning that should be looked into, should be penned down, so that we are not reactive, we are proactive. Flood is no longer an emergency. So let's stop reacting to flood and just bringing out relief material. It's beyond giving relief material. Yeah. It's beyond relief material.
As we are rounding up, I want to appreciate everyone who has called in our audience. Thank you so much. And to Halima here, thank you very much. Let me start with Mrs. Oguche. Your final words on the program before we leave.
People living by the riverside. In fact, we have been on radios, television, encouraging them to leave the riverside. But some of them are so adamant. They feel it is their ancestral home. So I want to encourage everybody, those that are by the riverside, you know what you have been passing through each time that there is flood. You don't need an angel to tell you again. You look for a place and relocate.
Mr. Olatunjoye, please your final words.
I think the Kogi State citizens should look forward to a very robust support this year, because for the first time, I must confess, the ministry is calling out for collaboration here and there, and people are responding.
All right, I want to say a big thank you to my guest, first and foremost, Mrs. Obuche from Hyperdeck, this Hyperdeck State Coordinator, and Mr. Falodun, the Director, Sanitation, Ministry of Environment. And I also want to thank the Commissioner for Ministry of Environment for always being supportive to our radio program. Thank you so much. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone out there, all the listeners. Thank you. This is brought to you by Titavi Women and Girl Child Development Foundation, and I'm looking forward to another robust time with you next upper Saturday. Thank you so much for joining.
All right, don't forget to join us next week in case you missed it for rerun. I've been your anchor person. Victory is my name, and from all of us here from Grace FM, from CTV, we say thank you and we say bye for now.
Woman don't suffer, lower everybody.